Hilchos Shvisas Asor Perek Shlishi, the laws of resting on Yom Kippur, chapter 3. It's the final chapter in this quite short set of laws discussing the mitzvahs related to Yom Kippur. And after spending 2 chapters related to the primary mitzvahs of Yom Kippur, eating and fasting, the Rambam goes on to talk about the halachot related to the other elements of inui nefesh, the other elements of afflicting the soul that are forbidden on Yom Kippur, which we actually learned the other day. There's 4 other afflictions that a person must do on Yom Kippur, which are not bathing, not anointing oneself with creams or ointments, not wearing leather shoes, and not engaging in marital relations. And in this short chapter, the Rambam addresses the basic parameters of each of these afflictions, each of these prohibitions, giving us the basic guidelines for what exactly is prohibited on Yom Kippur. And so without further ado, let's go halacha aleph. Asor lirchaytz b'yom kippurim, it's forbidden to bathe, to wash oneself on Yom Kippur. Bein bechamin, bein b'tzainin, whether in hot water or in cold. Bein kol gufay, bein ever echad, whether your entire body or only one limb. Afilu etzba ketana, asor lahishita b'mayim, even the tiniest finger, the pinky, cannot be placed into water in terms of bathing, if it's meant to be that experience of a pleasuring bath. However, a king, a Jewish king, and a bride are allowed to wash their face for specific reasons. Kala, the bride, is allowed so she doesn't appear unattractive in the eyes of her husband. The hamelech, and a king, is allowed to wash his face so he should be seen only in a beautiful state. Shenemar, as it says, the pasuk in Yeshaya and Isaiah tells us, Melech biyofyoi techazena einecha. A king in his beauty your eyes should behold. If you look in the literal translation of this verse, it's actually a futuristic wish that you will see, or a futuristic prophecy. You will see the king in his beauty. But in halacha, this verse is understood to be a command. Kings are only supposed to appear in public in a beautiful state. As a matter of fact, in the very end of the Rambam's 14 books, in the 14th book of the Rambam, in the last set of laws, the laws of Melachim, the laws of kings, the Rambam dedicates an entire chapter almost to other elements of this verse, and as it practically applies in Jewish law, that a king must take a haircut every day, he must wear certain types of clothes, because of this command, Melech b'yafyeh techazena einecha. So to on Yom Kippur, even though it's Yom Kippur and it's forbidden to bathe, in order for the king to appear beautiful in public, he's allowed to bathe, just wash his face at least. Now, we said a bride is allowed. The ad kama nikres kala, till when? How much time is a woman considered to be a bride after her wedding? Ad shleishim yom, says the Rambam. 30 days after the wedding. If Yom Kippur falls within the first month of the wedding, she can wash her face. Halacha beis, the prohibition, says the Rambam, of bathing on Yom Kippur is only for pleasuring bathing. But misha haya meluchlach b'tzoya etit. If somebody was dirty with excrement or mud, he may wash the place of the dirt normally without even worrying. Similarly, a woman can wash one of her hands in water, and then feed bread to a child. Child doesn't have to fast on Yom Kippur. We saw that yesterday. She wants to feed the child. She wants her hands to be clean. She can wash that one hand which she is feeding with. Similarly, a sick person can wash himself normally, even if it's not a dangerously ill situation. On Shabbos, we saw you can violate Shabbos for a cholesh sheyesh bo sakana, for a sick person who is in danger. But if he's not in danger, no. When it comes to Yom Kippur bathing, washing is allowed for a sick person even if he isn't in danger. The chol chayave tefillah, says the Rambam, a revolutionary concept. Those that are obligated in ritual immersion, toivlin kedarkon, may and must go to mikvah normally, bein b'tisha b'av, bein b'yom kippurim, whether on Tisha B'av or on Yom Kippur. There are many people that are obligated in ritual immersion biblically. When a person would experience type of ritual impurity, at the end, he would have to go to mikvah to purify himself. So if the day of going to mikvah came out to be on Yom Kippur, you have to go to the mikvah on Yom Kippur. Today, we actually don't do this. There's only one type of person who's obligated biblically to go to the mikvah nowadays, and that is a woman after her period. And nevertheless, even if the mikvah night falls out to be on Yom Kippur or Tisha B'av, a woman does not go to the mikvah. And that's because even if the woman, through mikvah, rids herself of the ritual impurity of being a nida, of being in her menstrual state, there is an overarching ritual impurity that's upon every single Jew nowadays till Mashiach comes. And that is the ritual impurity of a dead corpse, tumat met. Since we don't have the para aduma, the red heifer, to purify ourselves from ritual impurity of a corpse, we can never fully become pure. So even if going to mikveh would get rid of one element of impurity, it won't get rid of the overarching impurity. And therefore, even on Yom Kippur today, a woman does not go to mikveh, even though that obligation is biblical, since she won't rid herself entirely of all the ritual impurity that's on her. Halacha Gimel. If somebody sees a nocturnal emission of semen, nowadays on Yom Kippur. So we saw in the second book of the Rambam, when it came to the laws of Kriyat Shema and Tefillah, reading the Shema every day and davening, a Baal Keri, somebody who experiences an emission, originally was not able to do any holy acts or say any holy words till going to mikveh. So one might think that this is included in the rubric of Chayavei Tvilot, of those that are obligated to go to mikveh that may immerse on Yom Kippur. So the Rambam clarifies that it's not so simple. Im lahu, if the emission is still moist, mekaneach b'mapa v'daya, simply wipe it off with a cloth and that's enough. You don't get a license to bathe on Yom Kippur for that. V'im yaveshu oishen islach lech, but if the semen became dry or the person became dirty as a result of the emission, reichitz mekaymes hameluchlachin bilvad umispalo. He only has to wash the dirty places and that's enough to allow him to daven. The Asor le'lirchitz kol gufo yelitbal. It's actually forbidden on Yom Kippur to wash his entire body or to go to the mikveh. Here the Rambam gives the rationale, which also applies to the last halacha, as I said it before. Nowadays, when somebody goes to mikveh, he doesn't become pure mipnei tumat met, because there's always the ritual impurity of the corpse that stays hanging over him. And the whole obligation of washing after an emission in order to daven nowadays is only a custom. We have a major principle in halacha. Customs cannot be made to cancel things that are prohibited. Customs can serve a stringent purpose. They can forbid something which was permitted prior, but they can't permit something forbidden. Says the Rambam, you might have encountered a statement in the Talmud which says that one who sees a nocturnal emission on Yom Kippur should go to the mikveh. That was only said in earlier times. That was when the enactment of mikveh for Baal Keri, for those who saw emissions, was still in effect. We've already explained in Book 2 of the Rambam that this enactment was already cancelled. So on Yom Kippur, the Baal Keri has no license to go to the mikveh. Halacha dalid tit shehulach b'yoser. If there's very moist mud, so moist, says the Rambam, adam alav, that were a person to place his hand on this mud, vitale balachluchis, such moisture would arise onto his hand, sheim hidbik oisa liyadeha acheres tidbak balachluchis, that if he were to then take that hand and put it onto his other hand, the other hand would also become moist. That's called in halacha tofeach al manat lahatfiach. It's moist enough to make something else moist. Then this mud is not considered a mud anymore. It's actually considered water. Asor leishev alav, it's forbidden to sit on this mud on Yom Kippur. It's considered to be a derivative or similar to bathing. Similarly, lo yemale adam kli cheres mayim v'yitztanin bay. A person should not fill up an earthenware vessel of water and use it to cool off. People use different glasses. Sometimes they put to their face, or you put a cold soda can on your forehead to relieve pressure or whatever it is. You use it to get you cold. So in those days, it was not soda cans, but it was jugs. You would fill up an earthenware jug, get very cold, and you can use it to cool off, not on Yom Kippur. Shehamayim nischalim midafnav. Not because there's essentially a problem, but because the water might drip over the sides of the vessel, and then you might be considered to be bathing on Yom Kippur, to be washing. Afilu klimatches asor. Even metal vessels are forbidden to do this mechanism. Shema yinat zumayim al basarei, for fear that water will sprinkle onto your flesh. Umutar lihitztayin bapeiros. But fruit, produce that is cold, you can use that to cool off, because there's no worry of water coming out of that or any issues of bathing. Halacha hey lekeach adam mitpachas me'erav Yom Kippurim. Similarly, a person can take a cloth on the eve of Yom Kippur, before Yom Kippur, v'sheida isa b'mayim, soak it in water, make it very cold, umenagva me'at, then dry it off a little bit, umanicha tachas habegadim, and store it under clothing articles to keep it cold. Ulemachar, and the next day during Yom Kippur, ma'avira al panav ve'einei chayshish, he can pass it over his head or his face without worry. Va'afal pisha yesh ba koyer harba, even though there's much cold, but there's no water involved, and therefore there's no issue of bathing. Halacha vav, another exception to the rule of bathing. If somebody is going to do a mitzvah, to greet his teacher or his father, or somebody greater in wisdom than you, or to read, to study in a study hall on Yom Kippur, she can enter the water even till neck deep with no worries. Then you can go do the mitzvah that you went to do. And even when you return to your place, you can go back into the water. You know how Jews work. If you don't allow him to go back in the water, he'll never go in the first place. And it turns out you're stumbling him, you're making him fail from doing the mitzvah. Similarly, if somebody is going not for a mitzvah, simply to watch his produce. Don't ask me why he's doing it on Yom Kippur or when he found the time to do it, but he's going to watch his produce. He too can go into the water neck deep with no worries. Ubilvad, in both of these cases, provided that they should not take their hands out from under their cloaks, as they do in the weekday. Olden days, people didn't necessarily wear fitted clothing. They would wear these, cloaks that would go over your entire body. And when people would walk through water, they would raise their hands to avoid their hands getting wet. That's a weekday activity. If you have to go through the water on Yom Kippur, and we're going to allow you to, but we're still going to say, don't take your hands out. Go in a different way to show that you're doing something different because it's Yom Kippur. That's all as far as the obligation or the prohibition against bathing on Yom Kippur. Now we move on to the idea of wearing leather shoes. Asor, says the Rambam halacha zayin, it is forbidden. Linol minol v'sandal afilu beragle achas, to wear a leather shoe or a sandal even on one foot. Umutar latzes b'sandal shel sham b'shel gemi v'chayetze b'hem, but it is permitted to go out with a sandal made out of reeds or rushes, different types of bushes, reeds, and something similar. It's not leather, it's not firm. The koyrech adam beged al ragla v'yetze b'hem, a person could also wrap a cloth around his foot and go out with it. Shaharei koishi ha'aretz magia l'raglav, because the toughness, the hardness of the earth reaches your feet. In these cases, when you wear these loose material sandals or a cloth, you can still feel the earth. The hardness of the earth reaches your feet. Umargish shehu yachef, and you feel that you're barefoot, and therefore you don't have the pleasure. The whole idea of wearing a leather shoe is that you shouldn't have the pleasure of being able to walk elegantly. But if you're wearing a cloth and you're feeling the toughness of the earth, you're not having pleasure, so it's not considered to be a shoe, and it's not forbidden on Yom Kippur. The Rebbe pointed out that the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch, when he copies down this law, in the name of the Rambam, he quotes the Rambam as his source, he doesn't say koshi with a kuf, toughness of the earth. He says with a gimel, gushe, the clods of earth are what you feel on your feet when you walk. So a person walks barefoot, he can feel actual clods of earth, so it's an uneven walk. And that's the reason why it's permitted. And the Rebbe finds proof for this because in an ancient manuscript, when I read it to you here, I said koshi haaretz magia in the singular form. But in an ancient manuscript of the Rambam, it says magi'in. They reach his feet. They cannot be said about toughness. Toughness is a singular article. But if it says gushe, the clods of earth, magi'in l'raglav, they reach his feet, that makes more sense. And it's also, the Rebbe says, logically truer, because we don't find anywhere that you have to feel the toughness of the earth. So long as you feel the clods and it's just uneven, even if you don't feel that it's hard necessarily, you're already getting out of the issue of pleasure. So that's enough to allow you to walk with those types of shoes or cloths on your feet on Yom Kippur. Hatinoikos, children, says the Rambam. Afal pishein mutarin ba'achilo v'shsio chitza v'sicha. Even though we don't place most restrictions of Yom Kippur on them, they can eat, they can drink, they can wash, they can anoint themselves with ointments. Meinin oisan miminol v'sandal. We should stop them from wearing shoes. That's easy, it's easy education. Stop them from doing that on Yom Kippur. They should also wear non-leather shoes. Any person can wear a shoe if it's to protect himself from a scorpion or something similar, so it shouldn't bite him. That's not for pleasure, that's simply protecting yourself. Also, a birthing woman can wear proper shoes, mishum tzina, because of the cold, all 30 days after her birth. And a sick person is considered similar to a birthing woman. Again, afal pi she'ein sham sakana. Here too, even if there's no danger, the sick person can wear whatever types of shoes he wants or needs on Yom Kippur. Halacha tes, asur lasuch miktzas gufa kechol gufa. The next category of prohibition is sicha, anointing oneself. One cannot anoint yourself or put creams on any part of your body, just as it's forbidden to put it on your entire body. Bein sicha shel tainog, bein sicha she'ena shel tainog, whether the anointing is being done for pleasure or not for pleasure. Again, if he was sick, even if there is no immediate danger, or he has sores on his head, this person is allowed to anoint himself on Yom Kippur, normally with no worries. And the final issue of Yom Kippur is that of marital relations. And therefore, the Rambam tells us an interesting argument arose among the Jewish people. Halacha Yud, Yesh Mekaymes, there are some places, some communities, Shenohagu lahadlik esaner b'leila Yom Kippurim, where they were specifically accustomed to lighting a candle on Yom Kippur, the night of Yom Kippur at home. Why? So a person should have modesty in front of his wife, and not come to engage in marital relations. The halacha is that marital relations should only be conducted in the dark, not by the light. And so if there's light, you avoid the issue of marital relations. So Jews used to actually light a candle to avoid it. But other communities said no. They had a custom specifically not to light candles on Yom Kippur, because that might lead you to see your wife, and she'll find favor in your eyes. That might lead you to marital relations. Therefore, better to avoid lighting a candle and not get into the issue in the first place. However, says the Rambam, while on a regular Yom Kippur, there's merit to both opinions. In those years, which happens quite often nowadays too, when Yom Kippur falls out to be on Shabbos, every Jew is obligated to light candles in every place, because lighting candles on Shabbos is, of course, an obligation, and therefore, no matter what your custom is, the obligation overrides the custom. I should note that this argument was stated mostly when there was only studio houses, just one room. But if you have two rooms, a bedroom and a main room, of course in the main room you have to light a candle. The bedroom is where the issue would arise. And I believe today the custom is to keep the lights off. We don't light a candle at all, and we stay away from marital relations, as is the prohibition on Yom Kippur. Brich Rachamana Desayan, blessed is the merciful one for granting us assistance. Mazal Tov for concluding Hilchos Shvisas Asor, yet another section of laws in this third book of the Rambam.